Hello YouTubers, Victorinox fan here with another video. What you're looking at is another knife done ad nauseum in terms of reviews, at least on YouTube. The Strider SnG. I've had this knife since about August of last year, so I think I've had it long enough and used it well enough to give my thoughts and my opinion on it. Take it for what you will. Out of my entire collection, I'd say this easily falls into the, top 5 of my knife collection, and is my go-to knife for just tougher use now, even considering its cost. So, before I go much further, let's just shoot some specs out. Blade length is approximately 3.5 inches, total size 8 1/4, your close size or your handle size will be about 4 3/4. So it's I'd say medium-sized knife, not too different from the size of, let's say, a Turbulence or a Paramilitary 2 or a Manix 2. It's around that size range. Weight-wise, not too different either. It's only about 4.5 ounces or 4.45 ounces. This is good. It's actually not a very heavy knife, and I'll allude to one of the things that help, reduce the weight. So let's start this review off. I'm overall very happy with this knife. A couple caveats, at least on my particular unit. I'll mention those caveats later as the review goes on. So, let's start off handle up. This side of the handle is the infamous G10 side, or maybe famous G10 side, single piece construction, which I don't know any other manufacturers that are doing this. So instead of utilizing a stamped out piece of G10 and a stamped out backspacer, they take a solid thick piece of G10 and then CNC the entire thing out. What are the benefits of this? You can reduce the need for a steel liner or titanium liner on the inside, and you have increased rigidity. Increased rigidity because there is no seam at this point. This allows you to have generally a strong frame without the need of adding extra weight to the overall knife. Bad side about this is that it is an expensive process to do, and not all manufacturers are well equipped to do so. Many will just forego this and do 2 pieces because it's significantly cheaper. In fact, I recall reading that this is probably one of the, if not the most expensive procedures on this entire knife. So the G10 texture is good. It is not overly grippy. It is medium grippy, I'd say. Maybe a little less than the Emerson G10, and less than Spyderco's Colorado, US made knives. The opposing side is the titanium frame lock. Well, let's look at the titanium frame lock here. It is a stonewash finish. I generally prefer stonewash finish on over the flame titanium, and the same will apply to the blade. I'll get to that later. So, stonewash finish, very nice, aesthetically appealing stonewash. It is smooth to the touch. It doesn't have the same texture as, let's say, the Turbulence or the Sebenza, but texture is provided by the G10, so this is not a crazy important point. It contains a single, it is a generally very thick piece of titanium, not overly thick, not like a Rickender 551, but thicker than the small Sebenza, thicker than the Turbulence, and it's essentially about the same thickness of a large Sebenza. So, a nice, beefy, solid frame lock. Actually, for those of you who want a comparison, why the hell not? Here it is compared to the thickness of a Turbulence. And the Sebenza. Strider's a little thicker. The cutout, unlike the Sebenza, is on the outside. There are proponents for either one, for both of them, not either one, for both of them. However, I don't know the difference, nor do I really know the benefits of it. It just works. Both of them work fine. It's a moot point to me. This involves a Hinderer lock stop that they've licensed from Rick Hinderer. Benefit, allows you to prevent you from hyperextending the lock, which is a nice thing, because sometimes if you have gloves on, your dexterity is not the finest, and you might, ruin your lock bar, because if you hyperextend it, you damage the spring tension, you're in a world of trouble, because now you got to ship the knife back and etc, etc, etc. Nobody likes doing that. Let's see what else. You have a titanium pocket clip, which everyone has seen. This is also a one-screw construction, which is also very sturdy, but it goes about in a different manner than, let's say, Chris Reeve. Chris Reeve did a CNC perfectly milled out section so the pocket clip sits in there. What Strider does, it has a secondary hole, which a hook goes in, and surprisingly that works incredibly well in retaining the entire knife via just a single screw. This is pretty cool. The titanium lock bar has jimping. This allows you to easily get a grip of it and move it over, which is nice when you're, well, it's nice, but keep in mind that when you're going through the break-in period, you will develop calluses because it can be a little bit of a pain to unlock, but hey, no pain, no gain. Let's see, I've talked about the titanium frame lock, good, thick, strong. I'll talk about lockup. As of right now, the lockup on this is unbelievably tight. I did have to tighten the pivot, and it is cranked down really tight right now, so it's not like an easy flicking knife. I mean, yeah, I could do it, but it takes more effort than it used to because it had developed some play, both side to side and a little bit up and down. This seems to be alleviated by tightening the pivot screw. I'll get to the pivot screw and some of the details in a bit for that. But speaking of screws, let's talk about the other screws. Everything on this knife is very beefy. A lot of things can easily be screamed as overbuilt. Let's do a comparison on screw size. Look at the size on the screws on the Turbulence and the size of screws on the SnG. These are large, beefy, even the general screws, large, beefy, black coated screws. I'm guessing this is a good thing for strength. It definitely can't be a bad thing, which is a little interesting because this is definitely bigger than pretty much any of the other screws on my other knives, just general screws. And now let's talk about the big badass Strider pivot. The Strider pivot, you either love it or you hate it. I quite like it. Most reason being is it is ridiculously oversized for pretty much anybody's regular usage. But the pivot is one of the three weaker points in a knife. You've got your pivot, you've got your stop pin, and then you've got your lock. They've definitely got the pivot part down, mostly because now you don't have to deal with the fact that since it's being twice as large, it's probably not going to break on you. It's hardened stainless steel. It's pretty damn tough. The downside of this sort of a pivot is the fact that it is a proprietary pivot. Now you can go and buy $30, $40, $50 tools to unscrew it. I'm going to tell you that that is a giant waste of money. You can just go to your hardware store and buy, if you're the most expensive would probably be a set of snap-on circ-clip pliers. They'll be under 20 bucks and they can be used for other things, mostly because this is derived from a bike tool. The spanner pivot is derived from a bike tool. In fact, if you go to a bike shop, you might be able to find this individual key that fits this exact pivot and only costs you like under 10 bucks. The thing about the circle pliers is it's a bit more versatile, so it'll work with hinder pivots, it'll work with the PT pivot, all that other fun stuff. So check that out if you've got a Strider instead of having to spend a ridiculous amount of money. Big beefy pivot, the Allen screw goes on the other end. You're going to have to use two things at once. And keep in mind that it comes with Loctite on it, so it'll probably be good to heat it up a bit before you do, so you don't like strip anything. I believe that is the handle. Wait, one of the caveats I had with the knife was when I first got this knife, the pocket clip was, how to say, not really contacting the titanium. Now in a double-guided grip with a flame titanium where there is maybe greater texture, this would be good because it won't rip up your pants, but on the stonewash, it's very slick. So if it's not gripping the titanium at all, like even in the close position, then it'll just pretty much almost fell out on me. So I had to remove the clip, bend it with the plier, and now we are good to go. This is really, really tight. So that was one thing I had to do on my unit. Lockup is solid, lockup is early, lockup is tight, and it makes a badass noise every time you do it. I mentioned I had to tighten the pivot just to get rid of some blade play, but that's about it so far. Let's go into the blade because I've spoken long enough about everything else. Now, the blade on the Strider SnG is what they call a spear point, at least this unit. To me, it's more of a drop point, because when I think spear point, I think more like dagger style, I guess. This is a bit more of a traditional drop point. Has a bit of belly. It is a very, very thick blade, for at least a folder, in my opinion. I think 3mm is average. More than 3mm is thick. 4mm is more than 3, therefore it is thick. Unlike, let's say, a knife like the military, which is also 4mm, but tapers down like you wouldn't believe, for good reason. The SnG maintains its thickness throughout almost the entire knife. What this does is it's essentially a very thick grind. So not only thick grind coming down there, giving you a strong tip, but just generally a thick grind overall. What does this mean? It means it's tough as hell. Bad news? Well, if your edge geometry out of the box is bad, well, it's pretty much as useful as a butter knife. Unfortunately, my friends, I'll have to tell you that the edge out of the box was absolutely garbage. As you can tell, this has been heavily reprofiled and heavily used, mostly because when it came out, it was at least 25 degrees aside on the base and pushing 30 degrees aside near the tip. Now, I'll tell you one thing, that 30 degrees per side on any knife, especially a very thick knife, makes it pretty much worthless. Couldn't cut anything. So that really, really bugged me, especially considering this is a $400 knife. So that was a bad thing on this knife. And from what I've seen, generally, if you want to really use this knife for general stuff, or going hiking like I did, then you're going to want to reprofile it because the stock edge isn't really good and it won't really maximize the rest of the thick blade. Keep in mind though, once you do reprofile it, especially with this like semi-convex that turned out, it takes off wood really nicely. So that's a good thing. The blade is a stonewash finish. Stonewash finish is nice. I prefer it over the Tiger Stripe and the Digicam. It is simple, hide scratch as well, and doesn't look like a Mall Ninja knife. Let's see what else. Opening deployment and lockup. Well, again, I'll be on the lockup. So opening deployment is the opening hole. I still find an opening hole to be my favorite opening mechanism. Not as good as Spyderco's full round 14mm hole. Still better than a majority of thumb studs. What you see over here aren't necessarily thumb studs, they are stop pins. The stop pins, instead of being inside the knife, are located on a solid piece of steel fitted right through the blade. This is also a very, very, very beefy, very beefy stop pin, which is one of the other weaknesses of a folding knife. It contacts only with the titanium side, because if it contacted with the G10 side, it would wear and you would develop significant blade play over time. So, stop pin is very, very solid. Thick piece of steel on titanium. No qualms there. But the benefit is, if you have gloves on, your hand kind of uses both to open it. So you're gonna hit something to open the knife, which is cool. Let's see quickly what else is there to talk about. Talked about blade shape, very utilitarian, very thick. Right, let's talk about ergonomics and blade to handle ratio. So, unlike a knife, let's say the Sebenza, which is a great 1-to-1, almost a 1-to-1 blade ratio, the Strider SnG goes for the complete opposite. Very, very big handle, not a lot of not a lot of cutting space. So, under 3, just a hair under 3 inches, something like 2.9. This might bother you, this might not. Benefit, if you've got gloves, you've got a lot of real estate. I like it on some knives, I love it on this knife. I can go all the way back here, choke up, get a lot of reach if I need to do some sort of a longer range cutting, or most of the time just reach up here. Jimping is relatively effective. Prior to the actual blade part, it's very grippy, very aggressive. It's a little less aggressive up here. Some may say it's not the best. I'll agree. I think Spyderco's Japan made jimping, and even Kirby's jimping is better, but this is still somewhat functional, so I don't mind it. Is there anything else I need to talk about? Ergonomics. Ergonomics, I'd say, are good. When I first got it, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Used it harder, I realized there are a couple of flaws. First of all, no matter how you hold it, this area is a hot spot on your pinky, especially on the Lego grip and the Lego version of the SnG. You will feel it if you squeeze here. Second of all, when you hold it back here, it is a pistol grip. Benefit, you don't need a massive choil to prevent your hand from slipping forward. What it uses is your hand wraps around here when you hold it back here, and it digs into your palm instead. That is the pistol grip. It is different from, let's say, a guard. In most cases, I think it's a little bit better for utilitarian purposes because a guard prevents how many grips you can use a knife. You can't choke up. Here you could choke up, reach back, and trust me, if you were to stab into something, you wouldn't actually slide forward, but you would definitely hurt your palm because you definitely feel it. It's designed till you feel it. That's ergonomics. So what's my overall impression of this knife? Because I spewed out a lot of different things. Overall, I love it. I've taken this knife hiking. I've used this knife to pry out staples. I've I've used this knife a lot, and I will continue to do so because it still remains in my top 5. Is this knife for everybody? No. It's not the best fit and finish knife. I mean, the Turbulence and the Semenza kind of blow the Striders out of the water in terms of fit and finish, but you're not buying a knife of this cost just sheerly because of its super high tolerances. It is a very well made knife. There are a couple problems. I've seen lockup problems on some. My PT had some. Some can say their manufacturing is a slightly bit sloppy. Maybe. It's not definitely the tightest out of all I've seen. And some may argue they're not worth the $400. Fair enough. There's definitely some validity to that. It's hard to say that this knife is fully worth the $400 MSRP. I paid it. I'm happy. Would I buy another at MSRP? Probably not. I'd probably buy another at street price in terms of secondary market, just because then you can ask and really inspect everything, etc., etc. And if you guys are curious about Striders, I think these are really well-made knives. If you're a perfectionist, however, in terms of fit and finish, you might want to look at the Semenza or another mid-tech line. These are not that type of knife. These are a knife, however, when you get, you're not afraid to pick up and use. You're not afraid to use really hard, use really well, because it's just a well-thought-out knife. Aesthetically, when I saw it, I wanted it immediately. And after I managed to muster up the courage to spend the kind of coin, I think I'm satisfied. Do your research, read up a bit about it. If this knife floats your boat, check it out in the secondary market, and then if you like them more, I guess you could buy future Striders on the full price if that's your thing. Overall, I hope this review was helpful for you. It definitely dragged on longer than I thought it would. Peace out, guys. Have a fantastic day. See you around.